First ever electricity minister in a cabinet reshuffle aimed at addressing the power shortages that have led to daily blackouts lasting up to 15 hours a day. The new minister, Rita Omodia, will have the pressing task of ending the power outages and tackling allegations of corruption at state-run energy company Eskom.
The move comes after a state of disaster was declared in February, giving the government extra powers to resolve the crisis with few regulations and more funding. The governing African National Congress, ANC, is under political pressure to resolve the energy crisis ahead of the 2024 elections. Eskom's $26 billion debt, aging infrastructure and power stations, and recent strikes have contributed to South Africa's energy problems. Eskom is one of the world's biggest power utilities, supplying 90% of South Africa's power. And joining us for this conversation, we have Dr. Hermon Berhane Ogbamichael, Head Journalism Program, Cape Peninsula, University of Technology, Cape Town, South Africa. We also have Zakhele Madela, energy expert, who joins us also from South Africa. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for inviting us.
All right, so I would like to begin with you, Zakhele. Now, we're looking at the power cut in South Africa, and it's expected to reduce economic growth in Africa's most industrialized nation to just 0.3% this year. How severe are the electricity shortages in South Africa, and how are they impacting homes and businesses?
Good evening to you, ma'am, and your listeners. The power blackouts in South Africa, they're quite severe. They've resulted in a dent in the economy. But we are a nation that always rise up. We believe there is a unanimous agreement and a voice now to say that even though we had problems with the power system that was subjecting us to blackouts now and then, but unaware and completely taken off guard, the governing party appointed someone who went there with a clear purpose to destroy the national utility. We are very happy that there is a unanimous consensus now that this man had only one mission only. This is the outgone CEO, Andre the Rita. So the power cuts are quite severe, but we are very much hopeful that we will come out of this victorious because the president has acted to appoint the minister over and above, attempting to appoint the right-minded CEO. So to answer your question, the power crisis is quite severe, and it is subjecting the citizens and business into darkness. It is something that we have to arrest. Let me put it that way.
Thank you, Zakhele. I'd like to bring in Dr. Ogbamichael. Dr. Ogbamichael, can you provide more details about the state of disaster declared in February and what additional powers and resources this gives the government to resolve the crisis? Because when you declare a state of emergency, a state of disaster, it means you're tackling the problems head on. Has there been any improvement since then?
Well, the State of Emergency Act 64 of 1997 gives the president the power actually to make regulations in any regards related to state of emergency declarations like COVID-19 that we have seen, and last year with the blood crisis, I think in KZN. So this state of emergency actually will enable the government, first of all, I think perhaps, the government plans to absorb 2/3 of the Eskom, about 400 billion debts. And also the government plans to actually to ease some restrictions on licenses with regard to private entities to generate some renewable energy, which also are able to sell the surplus output to the grid, and maybe also to enable to exempt some essential services such as hospitals, water treatment plants, which are essential services, not to have blackouts, because they are very essential services. So these are some of the powers that the government will have. Plus, also, the government intends to provide some sort of solar panel as alternative energy plans to businesses. So to also be able to generate capacity or to assist them to generate capacity in businesses as well. So it's a wide range plans from the government's side. Yeah.
Now, still looking at the plans of the government to curb this electricity crisis, aside the state of emergency, there's also the position of the electricity minister. Now, President Ramaphosa said Ramaphosa now has the cabinet's most demanding job. He must end rolling blackouts by overseeing the fix on Eskom and bringing new energy to the grid. Now, what qualifications and experience does Hosiento Ramaphosa bring to the role of electricity minister? And how do you think, Zakhele, he will approach the challenges facing him? Zakhele.
Well, thank you for the question. Let me start off by what qualifications he's got. He is a civil engineer by profession. Holds a PhD, and he's got a Master of Business Leadership. And he has taught at some of the academic institutions, and he has led one of the biggest metros in the country. In fact, where the capital city of the country is, it's called the City of Tshwane, which is the old name, which is the new name for the old name that is called Pretoria. So he's an engineer by profession. He has been in the thick of things there, but unfortunately, he has not led a power utility before. But overall, he is someone that is quite well versed about the technical issues that are at hand. What I think will assist him to succeed as a Minister of Electricity, it will be to embrace all the stakeholders that have been shouting from all different corners, but it will also to be realistic and try and implement a model that has worked in other countries and not to try to force something that has not worked before. So if he is willing to go out and look at all other nations that have been almost subjected to the kind of situation that we are in, and is able to learn from those, he stands a better chance to succeed. I mean, countries like Germany and England have almost faced a similar situation in South Africa, but they acted, and they acted decisively. Some of the countries resisted to do what South Africa has done, because what we are currently going on is a self-inflicted injury in terms of forcing too much penetration of the renewable energy independent power producers at the expense of the baseload coal power stations and at the expense of procuring more nuclear power than we currently have, and doing basically what America is doing what Germany is doing what England is doing. So he will succeed if he goes out and asks himself a very hard question. What makes the electricity system work in other jurisdictions and in other countries that have got the same economic patterns like South Africa? Then he will succeed. But if he goes there with the mindset of wanting to force a non-implementable solution of subjecting the entire country to the renewable energy, he's going to fail dismally. But it remains to be seen. I think he's an engineer, he's open-minded. He will know about these things, that he cannot afford to implement a solution that speaks against science, that speaks against nature.
Thank you for providing that background, Zakhele. Now, Dr. Ogbamichael, in light of the recent resignation of Eskom CEO Rita Omodia, this makes him the 11th boss to have left the power utility in over a decade. What changes can South Africans expect to see in the new management and governance of the company? And how would this impact the energy crisis? And also working for the first time with the position of an electricity minister.
As you can see, the government has already appointed the electricity minister, and along with it, I think there is the other ministry that the president has appointed for planning, monitoring, and evaluation, which means it might go hand in hand to see if things are going well. But I mean, yes, actually, the president has already admitted actually, because the president has got about 162-page report that talks about the illegal activities by some about 71 service providers and what we call suppliers of ESCOM. So there is an admission that there are some issues in ESCOM that the new electricity minister that needs to deal with. But as you can see, the ministries and departments were fragmented in dealing with this electricity crisis. But with the new electricity minister, it seems that the government is very serious in trying to see this new minister coordinating the activities, to deal with the electricity crisis by working with ESCOM itself, ESCOM management or leadership, and at the same time with different departments and ministries. So there seems that there is a new approach, and the government has also about an 8.2 billion US dollar plan, actually as per the World Summit in 2021 that he dealt with some developed countries, whether it's France, Germany, I think it was also US and the European Union. And there is another 98 billion US dollars in the next 20 years that will help to implement. But the main task now is for the electricity minister to work, especially with the leadership side. He needs to be very courageous in dealing with all these issues.
Okay. Now, talking about courage, Zakhele, we've seen a series of allegations of corruption on ESCOM. Now we've had the 11th boss leave the position. And we saw one of the position members of the Democratic Alliance, Johnson Houston, say it's like the position of the electricity minister is like adding poison to the chalice. So first of all, do you think that position was actually needed? And has the root cause of the problems in ESCOM been dealt with before we can even move forward and see more or better things better in the electricity sector? Zakhele, are you still with us?
Can you kindly unmute your device, please?
Okay, let me put it this way. The president has got the prerogative to hire and relieve ministers. The fingers are pointing at the president and his cabinet. He is implementing what he believes is the best way to deal with this and is being advised by those who advise him. So we're not going to listen to an opposition party that does not offer the solution, that has got a long history of criticizing just about everything that this government does. We have to wait for the day where this particular political party called Democratic Alliance actually takes its electorates very seriously by coming up with a government-driven solution. What they do is they always pick on the government with an idea of selling the business opportunities for the private sector. So they themselves, they don't look at themselves as a political party, but they look at themselves as very much a private company. But to attend to your second question, I think the problems are going to be arrested. Of course, there's many problems in the systems, but we don't have to deal with all the problems before the president appoints a minister of electricity. I think the president is trying to say, let me get a dedicated minister to address all these problems that are now on the system. So we cannot answer the question, why shouldn't we deal with those problems first before we appoint a minister? We have to appoint someone to specifically look at all the problems that have brought us here. And therefore, we cannot answer the question of dealing with the problems first before we deal with that. In terms of the problems themselves, they're quite technical in nature and they are correct. They are quite corruption problems in nature. So between him and the Minister of Planning, this Minister of Electricity, they're going to have to keep some of the ministers on their toes and work with all the state institutions to arrest the corruption while the Minister of Electricity is implementing the energy plan. That is one of his primary jobs that he's been tasked. Implement the energy action plan and do away with the load shedding, deal with this load shedding, remove it completely. So he needs to be supported rather than people pointing fingers and saying we shouldn't be having a Minister of Electricity or not. I don't hear any other alternative solution. I'm hearing people criticizing the appointment of the minister, but they're not giving us the alternatives.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Zakhele, and of course, Dr. Ogbamichael, for joining us in this conversation. Wait to see how things pan out, especially for the electricity sector in South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
It was nice.
Thanks.